Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, whatever platform you listen to us on, wherever in the world you're listening. As always, your support is greatly appreciated. So for today's topic, we're going to talk about a unique situation that you may have faced before, and if you haven't, there's a good chance you're going to face it sometime in your coaching career. As we know, every year our team makeup is different, and each team has its own unique strengths and challenges. One of the more unique situations that you may face is players who come into your program who are learning the game late, and they end up on your team and they're late learners. Maybe they always played a different sport and they just picked up basketball. Maybe physically they were a late bloomer and so they didn't get into it until later in their teenage years. Or maybe they have kind of played a bit on and off, but they never really truly learned the game or learned it in an organized manner at least. So the question becomes what to do with those players, how to make them viable and sometimes key members of your roster. And that's what we're going to get into today with our guest. My guest, among other titles, is the head boys basketball coach at Central Mountain out in Pennsylvania. I'm very happy to be joined by Coach Tyler Bardo. Coach, thank you so much for taking some time to talk hoops with us. I know you're a busy man. How are you?
Doing well. I appreciate the opportunity here, Coach Hernandez. I think it's really important that we not only learn the game, but it's imperative that we take advantage of opportunities to share it as well. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, and I appreciate your willingness to share. So, Coach, let's go ahead and get started with your basketball journey, your coaching journey. Where's the game taken you, and what were the steps that got you to where you are right now?
As you alluded to, I'm currently the head coach at Central Mountain High School in Central Pennsylvania. I'm also serving as one of a few national directors for the Next Level U organization, which is a basketball service for scholastic kids looking to take their game to the collegiate level. We have multiple things that we do there. I would say, as far as basketball, my love for the game started around 12 years old. I just kind of fell in love with the artistry that is basketball. It was enjoyable for me. It serves different challenges every day, even now. Took me outside my comfort zone, from the sport I played, which was baseball, from a very young age, and very much abruptly quit that as soon as I got a taste of hoops. But also as a person, it's really helped me to get outside my comfort zone and some of the different things I've been able to do. Case in point, right around 14 years old, I was fortunate enough to be asked to go play in the Henri Dessous tournament in Ardres, France. And I was a part of at the time, the first USA team to enter that particular tournament. And you can imagine having that experience at such a young age, just kind of, and a positive one at that, just kind of enthralls you and wants you to kind of lead you to see what more can I do with this. I say novicely here, pursued college basketball at Hood College in Frederick, Maryland. And very quickly, though, I knew from my days in high school, I wanted to educate kids. And it wasn't long into my time at Hood College where I knew that maybe that wasn't the best place for me to do that. And quickly my route to being relevant in coaching basketball was going to be different than most. A lot of guys that coach have deeper backgrounds maybe than just high school basketball in terms of their playing days. But I was willing to accept that and transferred a little closer to home and began coaching professionally. And by that, I just mean I earned a paycheck doing it around 19 years old.
Wow.
It cultivated into a great opportunity for me being the director of basketball for FLS International, which was a program for kids overseas to come to the United States, not only study the English language, but also study, a specific pathway. There was photography and basketball as well. And that happened to land right here in my hometown of Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. During that, I had 20 kids from 11 different countries outside of the United States that I got to teach basketball to. Wow. And and that was in my early 20s, and it was just another one of those stepping stones, but again, more fuel to again see how far can I go with this. If I can reach these kids from this many countries, what can we do with the kids right here on U.S. soil, and even more directly right here in my hometown. Which leads me to taking over my high school program, my alma mater, about 4 years ago as the head coach. We've had some successes. We've had some years that have been a little more trying as well in those 4 years. Appearing in 2 district championship games, to this point, a league championship as well. And then, I try to make sure that I'm not defined as, in one particular realm. And sometimes that happens when we take over a program as somebody who oversees the entire thing. But I've kept, my learning continuing from other coaches and things through numerous AAU programs. And I was very fortunate with my relationship with Coach Michael Bailey to have worked the inaugural Allen Iverson Roundball Classic, which was held in Virginia that year. And just be around some tremendous players who are now in the NBA, some wonderful coaches who helped them get there. So that kind of leads us all into today, and why I'm so passionate about the things that we're doing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. There's so many, not only steps along the way, but like we alluded to, so many things that you're still involved in and that you still keep active with, which before I get into our topic was something I want to touch on, because you have the unique experiences that you do, both being the national director at Next Level U, as you mentioned, also doing the skill development work that you're doing. So how have those positions kind of changed your approach or the way that you go about coaching your program at Central Mountain?
I have to stop and think, about what is my passion. A lot of times we can get, we can look at liking something versus loving something versus being passionate about something. My passion is education and being able to teach players, teach kids. My day job, if you will, is I'm a kindergarten teacher. So yeah. So talk about patience right there.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
It's awesome. It's been a nice yin and yang. But my passion is education, and basketball is a mode of transportation for me to teach that. And I know that I can reach more human beings through basketball, perhaps than just in the classroom. This derived from my hands-on work alongside guys like Coach Mike Bailey, as I mentioned, trainers Gannon Baker, Coach Cody Topper, Mike Lee, Damon Altizer, and more. I've been fortunate enough to work with those guys from the training side of things. And it kind of, again, I don't advertise myself much as a trainer or, as a coach or whatever. It's more word of mouth, and it started with guys like Nate Brown, who was just looking for help to make a Division III roster here locally. And he turned that into some great opportunities for himself. And then, that led to me being able to train some overseas professionals like Wally Hepburn and Rais Hunt, Cole Renninger. Right now, Matt Cerruti just transferred from D2 here in Lock Haven University to a Division I in UAlbany for this coming season. I've been able to work with and train the Division III MAC Player of the Year in Colin Jones this past year. And, I don't take credit for where those guys are. Those guys wanted to be great players. They had great people and coaches in their corner along the way. It's just, I found myself fortunate to help them. And, I learned through all the work with those guys who shared this passion, for me, education, for them to be educated. And, what I learned, and I'm still learning, is how to marry those two things, which kind of leads into your question of, I try to ensure that my team approach is conceptually based. In other words, we're not a program that runs a continuity offense. We do have a guide, just to kind of let them be creative. I always tell my guys, you're the artist, right? Here's your brush. Here's, what our offense is.
I like that.
It's you guys paint the picture each and every possession. Having that conceptual based offensive mentality kind of allows me to then drill and train individuals, whether it's as their coach or as their trainer, in the areas of their skill sets, as they fit with the team need and where they can maximize what I call their primary game. So kind of their biggest strengths, whether that be natural or just what they've always worked on to this point. And while developing their secondary aspect of the game, which to me is just a counter to that primary game. And again, learning how to marry those things has been something that has not been easy, but we're finding more and more success with it, to the point now that the players that I train that aren't players that come from my high school program, one of the first things I always ask them is, what's your offense like? Where do you get a lot of shots? How do a lot of your shots derive from your offense? Because I want to focus on you just being the best at that. And then, that thought process to this point has led us to have 2 conference MVPs in my time here, and 12 all conference selection, 5 of which were first team, all conference selections. And, overall coaching and training are, again, as I go back to this, ways to educate. But it's important that we know they're not the same thing. At least in my opinion, coaching and training are not the same thing. Developing a plan to increase and strengthen a player's skill set is training. Helping others see the benefit of that player's ability and how it helps us and each person and teammate is coaching.
Yeah, I like the distinction there. That's a really good way to put it. I don't think I've ever heard it quite put that way, but I really like that. Really like that a lot, actually. Good. So as you just kind of alluded to, some of the success and some of the ways that you guys have done things at your current position right now, I'm sure, as we're going to get into, some of that involved our topic of talking about late learners, players who are learning the game a little bit later than others. So let's go ahead and start, Coach, with some experiences that you have with players who are learning the game late, and what you did and how you worked with those players to kind of get them caught up to speed with the game and what you were looking for them to be successful in your program.
Sure. I think before I get into that, it's important to know that this development process for late learners is one that, for me, I also consider for players that have little playing experience. For example, they might just be seasonal players. In high school, we have that, right? We have these multi-sport guys, and they have their focus sports. So I think it can be used as much for seasonal players or experienced players that are new to your system or your team. Maybe they have varsity experience with another program, and they transfer in and now they're learning your program or your system. I kind of go down through a checklist of about 5 things, and in no particular order for anyone, but I mean, I do try to look at it from this perspective in this sequence most of the time, is review their fit on the team. What do they bring to the team? What does your team already have? Where can they be maximized at? Assess their natural positive elements that they bring to the game. So in other words, are they a player that has some natural athletic gifts, something that can be of use and of positive impact? I always use the phrase impact winning. How do you impact winning when you're a part of a team or a group? And do they have some natural things that maybe are intangible that you can't coach, that can help you right away? Because a lot of times that, if they do, that can be a way right off the bat to ease them, to comfort them, to know that they're making a good decision coming in, late. And, especially in hoops, we know it's a high skill set sport. You need to have some skills to be able to be successful in this game. And sometimes that can be daunting. But I think to try to find those positive elements right away that they might bring naturally is comforting for them. Where do these players fit into your team concept is a big one for me. And then what class is the player? For example, are they coming out for the first time? They're going to be a senior. Are they coming out for the first time and going to be a junior, sophomore, freshman? I think that all plays a huge part into, what is your vision for them, and what is your designed plan, which is my last thing, which is to design a plan for their development. And obviously you can understand how if that player is going to be a senior, it's going to be a short-term development plan, that's going to have to something that, to kind of go to the NBA, right? There's some organizations that are set up to win right now. And there's other organizations that are looking to build over time. So it's that way for an individual player too, is, are they going to have to help you right now, or can you even slow their development a little bit and help them to grow over time to be something that's going to be really an asset to your program? The athlete, I have two athletes right now, actually, that are in some of these situations. I have an athlete that just moved in. He's a junior. He has varsity experience. He's going to be here for 2 years. But to learn our system and how we do things is a little bit different for him right now. So he's more of a guard potential player. And what we're looking at is intense short periods of work on specific prerequisite skills that are needed to be successful. So if this player is a good athlete without many other intangibles, let's say, maybe he's not a great shooter right now, or, again, he's new to our system. So there's not a lot of things that he's aware of. It's not like he's been here for numerous years and heard me say things, inside and out. What an example of what my plan would be for a player of this position. So again, a player with experience coming into a new program from a guard spot. I'm looking at, within our offense, which we're a motion offense that has a few different elements. I'm looking at his attack footwork to build a straight line drive thought process for him. I'm looking at a 2-foot finish package. Over time we would build to a 3-finish series. Each one taught as a counter to the other, and how to hunt. It's one of those things that I'm always telling guys, hunt those opportunities within our offense. So for example, a player that isn't a great shooter, but he's explosive. He's a good athlete. He's just got a nose for contact. In our motion offense, I'm looking for him to understand, okay, hunting these shots. If you're going to set a screen and you're popping, that's a great way to create a closeout that you can attack in those straight line drives, which is the things that we're working on with you to ease you into this. As we develop other things, such as your ability to shoot the basketball and, from the perimeter or what have you. Obviously looking for those opportunities off of driving kick elements as well in the offense. Moving to an athlete that is going to be a post potential player for us, came out for the first time last year as a junior. A little bit of an unfair situation as we're all dealing with COVID. Things aren't quite
sure.
We don't have an off season to build off of, and quite literally, those practices, varsity level practices, are his first opportunity to play. And we essentially just said, this guy, we can't give him too much. We just need to let him roll. We need to let him play and get his feet wet. And when he looks comfortable, we'll start to teach a little bit. And for this player, he's going to be a senior for us this year. We're looking at deliberate work on 2 simple moves, each one with a counter. He's not a great shooter, but he does have phenomenal leaping ability, great strength, really just a raw, true athlete. We're going to teach him to initiate contact within that seal footwork, because I think that's a big thing for post players. Our look is going to be, we're going to work with a drop step, with a step through counter, working those things middle of the floor as well as baseline. And then we're also going to look at, if he's put in a situation where he gets more of a mid post touch to face up, you got one dribble to a 2-foot finish and then a step through counter as well. The mic and drill is going to be the best friend for a player like that each and every day, just to gain that comfort level. Other elements of our offense that he could find himself in would be ball screens. And simply all we do there is we're going to mandate that you roll off of that every single time to get you back to those areas where we're teaching you, ways for success. We certainly value the defensive ability for a player like this as well, and teach him how to alter shots, how to be there and help defense and things of that nature. And that's a real life plan right now that we're going through with 2 guys in this exact situation.
With the player that you just talked about, the potential post player that you have, when you're having a conversation with that player, are you kind of laying out, here's all the steps that we want to build you up to, and like this is going to be a challenge that you're going to have to want to rise up and meet, or are you saying like, hey, these are the absolute like things that you're absolutely going to have to do, and like, if you want to play more, you're going to have to like reach, these develop, more post moves or develop more of like finishing ability. How much do you put on them as like, this is what you absolutely have to do versus like, here are all of the things that we are going to make sure that you are able to do, by the time the year's over?
I think that's really dependent on the player. So if this is a
Mm,
player who maybe this is the only sport he does, you might be able to take that approach and kind of dangle that carrot of increased playing time the better that you get, and the more skilled that you get. However, this particular player, he's a football player as well, so a lot of his fall is going to be spent on the football field. And I don't ask my athletes to come and put in hours of work after a practice or before a game either, when they're in a fall sport, which
Yep.
I think is probably true for a lot of us. But, being that that's the situation it's in, the best thing for me to do is to lay out what is going to transpire for him. And, here's your very clear cut rules. Here are the things that we need you to do when you're on the floor. And also knowing that any late starting player or player that's new to your program that essentially is in that same situation, is they're going to get better naturally. They're
Mm,
just their time on the floor, hearing these things, being taught these things day in and day out, is going to help them. And that's why I say that this is players like this, sometimes if you can find a way for them to impact you positively and impact winning, as I said previously, they're only going to get stronger as the season goes on. And same can be said, like I said, this particular player is a senior, and we're going to try and maximize everything that he's got for the 22 regular season games and hopefully our postseason. But if you're dealing with a player that's a freshman, sophomore, junior, somebody who's going to have multiple years, you can start to see how by the end of year one, we want this. By the
mhm.
end, but then going into that offseason, we're really going to look to develop your areas here. So it's all about, again, that year and how many years they have going into it is something that's really important, especially at the high school level. Just because, they only have
Yeah.
so many years to do this thing. And as we talked about, it is a game that's very skill based, and, the more skilled you are, the more you're able to do, but that doesn't mean that you can impact any more or any less. As we've seen, as the NBA, for example, is deriving, you're talking about a lot of niche players and a lot of players that are drafted, speaking of draft night, or, they're acquired and asked to just become niche guys,
Yeah, fill a spot,
specific
fill a
shooters,
role.
specific role players, is becoming such a thing. And I don't think that, it's such a bad thing to necessarily do that at the high school level, especially with late learning basketball players. So, a lot of times that's going to maximize their experience in your program as well.
I think that would be especially true for, a player, just using it as an example, like you talked about, like a football player who, if that's their primary sport and that's what they primarily do, and maybe they put in significant more amount of time in that sport than they do in basketball. Maybe, they're doing basketball and they're not necessarily looking to exert as much like mental energy into thinking about the game, or learning as much of the nuance of the game as maybe players who solely
Right.
like focus on basketball, right? And maybe they just need to be told what to do, and they can do, maybe in football there's a lot more pressure on them and a lot more is expected of them because of their talent and skill set. But maybe in basketball, they defer, and other people are the leaders, or other people are the more talented ones, and they can just kind of fill that spot, be a part of the team, and that perfectly works out for them.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think that I can be honest with you. Like, I feel like that was a huge problem for me. And it's something that has, kind of, I've had to reflect on it. I've had to think about it a lot. I've gone through these, a
Mhm.
number of players. I've coached every level from seventh grade through senior high. And, so I've experienced these guys that are coming out for the first time late in their scholastic careers numerous times. And one of the first things when I was younger, I said, what are we going to do with a guy like this who's coming out? Don't they understand that this is a really difficult sport to learn? And, but then, guys come along who are like that. And yet you just see the value in what they can bring, and, they can change the dynamic of a team very, very quickly. And I've kind of had to kind of cultivate my way of thinking about this over time. And I'm glad I have. It's led me to have some great relationships with players, even though for a short time. But it's allowed them to have some great experiences in the program. And ultimately, as high school coaches, that's got to be our top priority is that we have make sure that our guys have great experiences for them, and kind of, as you said, what they're after in the program. Some guys are all about it, and some guys just want to have that experience.
So now that's getting me thinking about from a coaching element of these players who are learning the game late, developing the game late. I have experience of this too, and I'm sure you're the same way. What it kind of forces you to do as a coach is really like simplify your language, be very direct with the way that you communicate. And I think it makes you a better coach because you have to take all the information, all the terminology, all the things that you might normally want to say, and you have to make it concise. You have to make it something that's just very easy to understand. And I don't think it's a bad thing as a coach to sometimes be forced to simplify your language or maybe shorten things up a little bit in your communication.
Well, and going back to your second question about how does training kind of lead to my coaching now, is one of the best things that I heard when a while ago, whenever I had the opportunity to work a camp with Gannon Baker, I'd listening to him and just taking pages of notes listening to him. Short and sweet was his advice to coaches, and particularly I noticed he always would speak in rhymes. It's just something that gets your attention. And I'm like, hey, I'm a kindergarten teacher. I am
Perfect.
rhyming, you know what I mean? So exactly, simplification of your language and how you're teaching things is definitely a way to go. And it's such a great tool, not only for new players, but for any player. Because ultimately what they want to do is they want to play, you know what I mean? So find ways to get your message across quickly and let them get after it.
And then just kind of taking that and just into like a game application just for all of your players. I imagine if you are doing that and you kind of simplify your language, I love the rhyming thing. It makes things probably a lot easier to call out on the court if you just have to say a couple words and there's immediate action that can follow from that, and you're not barking out very complicated sequences with like multiple paragraphs that you're yelling out in the court.
No doubt.
Yeah. So another tricky situation that sometimes happens, this is kind of a question that's kind of popped into my mind, is your balance that you and your staff have with players who are learning the game late versus your players who maybe have been doing basketball their whole life. They're all in, they're committed, they have a level of understanding about the game or a skill set that might be, just far surpasses where you have, other players on your team who might just be learning the game late or picking it up their junior and senior year. How have you kind of worked schematically in terms of X's and O's, offensive and defensive, in a way that kind of is able to merge both of those type of players together?
So, we try to put the more intricate parts of hoop on our guys that are a little more serious about it, that work at it, that really want it to be, maybe pursue it going forward beyond high school, or just want want to be the best basketball player they can be at this level for the time that they're here. And we actually did that quite a bit last season, where I had specific calls for my top three guys who, as starters, were really my basketball first mentality type kids. They worked on it. They had great versatile skill sets. And then my other two starters, while very much necessary to our success, but they were kind of the kids that they were just extremely coachable kids. They understood that they hadn't worked on it, and they were okay with that, but they understood that they brought a positive impact to winning as well on that team. And so we had certain calls that those three guys would just really be the only ones on the floor to know what that was. And you kind of put it on them there, and the other guys just have specific roles where it's okay. If this happens, you're going to cut. If this happens, you're going to get a screen. And, we even went as far as we have a little pass and screen away offense where we said to some guys, listen, you weren't here. You didn't really read or work on the 4 ways to read coming off of a down screen. We're just going to mandate a tight curl. Go ahead, mandate a tight curl. And if you get the ball on that tight curl, we trust that you're going to finish with a, we worked on our finishes all the time, 2-foot finish packages. We try to simplify things for them, understanding that, just because it's not their primary thing, it's not their maybe their passion, however you want to phrase it, it doesn't mean that they're not impactful. And, I think that's one of the biggest things that we worked on last season was helping everybody to understand that. And, it was really well received, and it was something that we actually grew stronger and stronger as the year went on.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point about how, just for some players, right, if they weren't there, or they just hadn't been able to put in the time in on certain things, and there's certain things that just aren't gonna be available for them. But like we just talked about, kind of maximizing what their strengths are. And I imagine, and I'll let you speak to it then, your players who have been, really committed to the game and have been sticking with it for years and years and years, they understand who those players are who are maybe learning late, and are they able to, be able to handle the fact that you're probably going to communicate, or maybe even in some cases expect a lot more from them in terms of what they're doing or their decision making than maybe other players who are learning the game late?
Yeah, I think too, you'll find that a lot more kids actually maybe prefer that, where the decision making is taken out of it and they can just play, which is what they want to be there for anyway. They just want to play. But that, obviously I think they want to be, from a team aspect, a part of something bigger than them, which is why anybody becomes a part of a team, really. But I think that they do. They kind of appreciate the fact that, hey, you guys go ahead, you make those decisions, you create for me, and I'm just going to stick to the script and what I'm going to do to help make us successful.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I'm glad that balance is able to work, because, I think that's a big culture aspect. I think that, I'm sure you've seen programs, and I've seen programs where, players are, treated differently, and sometimes they don't understand why that is, or maybe the culture isn't developed that way to understand it. But if your players get it and they understand, like, hey, like, this is, I know what's expected of me, I know where this player's at and where they need to be, but I know where I need to be, and kind of have that happening, I think that you end up seeing a lot more success.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. So in terms of your own coaching, by having to teach players late, we kind of talked about simplifying your language, but what have your experiences kind of teaching these late learners and having to kind of bring them on and bring them up to speed? What has it kind of taught you as a coach, or how has it made you into a better coach, having to incorporate those players into your program?
Oh, I mean,
count the ways, huh?
Yeah, right. It's something, you go back to that word simplify, and I'll go back real quick and just give some examples of some of that language that we use. Specifically, let's talk about the guard, who's he's new to the program, but he's learning the system and how we do things. He's going to hear a lot of phrases like one to the rim, one to the ball, tight flash fade, referring to some of the ways we read our down screen cuts, ankles on ankles, referring to what he would be taught. Again, I've kind of mentioned those prerequisite skills. In terms of, that read step coming off of the down screen, slot, wing, corner, which are just the positions on the floor we want to fill in our offense. That post player might hear things like line of deployment, which is, again, these are all phrases that we would work on from the training side, from the player development side. And they're things that we can, they're quick one-liners or even one words that we can yell out to these guys: high, low, mid post, understanding those areas on the floor, sprint the rim, trail to drag, which are things that are, again, part of our offense in both primary and secondary breaks. Overall for me, I'm a guy that I love to talk, and I love to talk hoop, and so much so that my wife yells at me all the time for cutting her off mid-sentence because a thought pops into my head and I'm like, man, I gotta get this out. I'm the same way. I coach with so much energy, and it's allowed me to come to realizations of self-reflection, and have to, got to the point last year in the season where I felt, while at the time I wasn't a parent, I felt like I was in how the guys were kind of hearing me. And in other words, it was kind of that whole, yeah, I hear you, Dad, in one ear and out the other. To where I kind of let my assistant coach take over a few practices, even towards the end of the season, because I just felt like my voice needed to be heard in those really crucial times. You needed to hear me in games, and even in practices, though I wasn't leading some of those practices. When I spoke, when I made a point, I noticed I had their attention a lot more. They really let it sink in a lot more, and it meant more to them. So these, simplifying this language has talked about, having to simplify your mentality, your approach as well.
Yeah, it's so hard, I think, sometimes because like I just consume so much basketball and coaching related knowledge. Like you have all of this inside you, and it's almost like in some cases, as you kind of just brought up, this like waiting to come out at any moment, like you're waiting to just let it all out. But
like a volcano, man.
Yeah, absolutely. But your players, they don't need all of that. They don't need all of the knowledge that we have, and they need they kind of need what they need, and they need to hear what they need to hear. And
right.
Like we just kind of talked about earlier, when you have players who are kind of learning the game late, you don't have a choice, as we just talked about, but to keep things simple, for sure. No, that absolutely. On the topic of, you mentioned a couple times you have players who maybe have played a little bit, or they've kind of maybe not even necessarily in the recreational sense, but maybe they come to you and they think they have a certain skill set, but they really don't know the game that well, and you have to almost do some unlearning and then relearning. Have you had experiences with players who've had to you've had to kind of break down some maybe misconceptions or some things in their game that weren't where they needed to be, and kind of build them up and kind of learn them the right way? And if you have, what sort of challenges has that brought?
Yeah, I would say we're not in an area where we get a lot of players that move in, for example, although it seems funny. We have guys coming up through our junior high program that are now going to be entering our JV program. We have one that moved here from Maryland, one that moved here from Alaska, out of the military. These are families that are from here originally, but coming back, now that their time is done or the job has brought them someplace else. And we also have a player he's lived here his entire life, and he was at a different school, and now he's they're decided to come back, and it's weird because we're not used to getting guys like that here. We don't have those things happen here. Yeah, it's we're a big school in a small area, and I would say that it's taught me that no two players are the same. And it's taught me that, basketball is taught differently all over the world, all over the country. And I'm cautious to say that I'm unteaching anybody or, unlearning them from something, or, as you kind of alluded to, the right way. I feel like if I phrase it that way to guys, that's like saying, my way is the be all end all. And it's not. And but I try to help them to see, okay, this is how we do things. This is the why. I always try to answer the why, and I tell my guys, if I don't answer the why, you need to ask it, because if you don't know that, then it's just not going to stick. And I found that in doing this, in kind of not restructuring their thinking, but just adding to what they already believe they know about basketball, or feel very comfortable and confident in, is, I try to speak directly. I try to speak with facts, especially with these newer guys and guys from other programs or that have experiences outside of our program. I try to refrain when they come in from long-term visions or talks of potential and those types of things. We just, those things kind of derail the focus of them. And we need to keep it right now. We need to keep it very direct, perfect time, to use the Giannis quote. I try to stay in the present, right? This is what you need to learn right now to be successful in our program. We don't want to place fences around anybody as a player, because like I said, it is such an artistry, and it's meant to be that way. But I do want players to have success, and, that success breeds confidence, and with confidence comes more opportunity to build them as players. So, we don't really try to say your way is wrong. We just try to talk in terms of, how can we be more efficient in what we do?
It's kind of like a language, maybe just like here's the terminology, or here's like our language that we use in this program. Like, not that what you had before sometimes isn't necessarily wrong, but this is just the way that we speak it over here.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, like you talk about perfect example is, like I said, down screens, wide pin downs are a big part of our offense and a big element of our motion offense. And, you have the curl. Well, a lot of times guys, they depict curl as coming into that mid post or elbow area for a jump shot. We have two different types of curls. We have a tight and a long. So we usually don't say curl other than when we teach it. When we're really drilling it and trying to rep it in live play, it's tight, 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 or long, long, long. And guys know what that is. The other thing is, you might have guys coming in one area, they have another coach that, and you get this with AAU too, right? They could be guys that have been in your program forever, but they're, AAU is becoming so prevalent, and, so many guys are teaching in women as well. And they're using just different terminologies. And I think that's great. I think it's great that they go out and they hear some of those different ones, but when they come here, they understand that, okay, maybe we don't use the word flare, we use fade when you're coming off of this, or when you're making this read. And it's, there's synonyms, but, I'm not going to use that word just because it's not the one I use.
Yeah.
It's so, I mean, that language, and I try to embrace that. I try to foster that says, it could be this, or it could be this. This is what we use though.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's just, this is the term, and, those terms, they're a reason why you like them. There's a reason why your program uses them, and somebody else comes in that might be a different term that they have, but just here's our language.
Bring it back to the overall topic is, it can become confusing for those newer players, or whether it's new to basketball or new to your program. If we mix up terminologies, you let guys call it what they want to call it, then it just becomes more confusing for those players. And we try not to let their heads spin as much as possible. And we seem to, key word here in this segment seems to be simplify. So just keep it simple.
What you brought that up, and I was thinking about a girl who I coached a few years ago, and she didn't have a lot of basketball experience, really good athlete, but not a lot of basketball experience. And I was just talking and giving instruction, and I used the term drive and kick, and then she immediately glanced down at her feet, and I was like, oh no. I was like, wait, hold on. Let's explain what it is I mean by that. But just things like that, where it's like you can just use these terms, and it's like, oh wait, hold on, this is what this means actually.
Right.
Stuff happens.
And it is, and you just, I think the biggest thing too is when it comes to the language is just try to use it all the time. And
yes, yeah,
sometimes the guys will, I've had players in the past, man, they have some fun. I think we all do as coaches. We have these certain things that we say all the time, and these guys really had some fun at my expense at one of our banquets postseason wise. And I was like, hey man, whatever, if it sticks, it sticks. I'm cool with it. At least I know you were hearing me, right? At least I know that you were paying attention.
I remember, before we get back to the topic, I remember, especially during COVID last year, when teams had to meet virtually and they were trying to do team bonding and team togetherness. One of the activities a lot of coaches love doing was having their players do their best impersonation of their coach. And that was a really good one to see some of the language that they use and some of the terminology they just kept repeating over and over again. But hey, that stuck with them.
It did, and we actually did a book discussion for that time that we were off. We did a Zoom meeting every Wednesday night, and we did book discussions, and it was Jay Billis's book Toughness that we were.
Oh yeah, great book.
Phenomenal book, and one that's it's kind of basketball stories, but really it's life lessons. And I remember there was one part there that we were talking about. Do you feel how do you feel I am in terms of coaching you? And I said, this is your one time where you can, there is no strings attached. You can say what you need to say about it. And they had some fun at talking about those things. And man, I think you're going to do this. When you get quiet, that's when you're really upset. And how they key on those things that I swear I never told them. But they pick that up all on their own.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. For players who are learning the game late, what I guess if we're trying to like do a little ranking system, whatever, defense and being able to whether it's play man to man, play a zone, whatever system it is, how important is it for that player to get right on defense versus the other aspects of the game for you and your program?
I mean, I got to think that just logically, defense is probably the easiest thing to learn and to grow some real comfort with whenever you're a late learner of the game of basketball. Only
Mm,
because so much of it is effort, and I'm a big guy in terms of saying, hey, say your job and say what you see, because we all know communication is a huge thing. Um, on the defensive end, especially if we're going to work as one unit. And, so often that means, what am I supposed to say? Well, tell me your job. Or do you have ball or do you have help? And say what you see, screen coming, cutter here, and it'll take care of itself if you can remember to say those two things.
mm.
And those are, again, simple for new learners of basketball to learn and to, uh, you know, kind of grow into very quickly. And, you simply tell them, listen, it's going to start on this end. And the offense, I like simple, easy offense. If we can get points off of turnovers, that's, and not have to run offense, that's even
Yeah.
better. So it's really just an effort thing. And I think, again, if you can get them to say, say your job and say what you see, you're going to gain and develop some IQ for them on the defensive end very quickly. And that positioning can kind of take care of itself. We always talk about weak side rotations and drop down to help the help. Those things take care of themselves if you can get them to talk those simple things. So get them excited about going out there and playing defense is something that we really try to do. Help them understand what benefits that's going to bring to us on the
Mhm.
offensive end, and it could ease them into some offense. There's something to be said for being one of five out there on the floor, and maybe you're not offensively gifted, or you're just not quite there yet to be really productive. But man, if the squad on the floor is being productive, whether that's you directly or not, you get a little bit of a swag to yourself when you're out there. Like, yeah, I got look at my plus minus. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I think it's all relative, but I do think that the defensive side for new learners is a little bit simpler because it's all about the energy you bring and the intensity that you bring with that.
Something that I've kind of gotten the sense of in this conversation is that you seem to be very explicit with your players about letting them know like what their role is, what's expected of them, like what you personally would like for them to be doing and perhaps like where they could grow to throughout the season. Do
So
you have explicitly those conversations with like all your players? Do you talk about like roles and what's needed out of each player, or is that something that they sort of like pick up on or kind of get naturally, or how does that kind of work with your program?
I'll say over my 4 years here as a head coach at Central Mountain, I didn't start doing that. I wasn't a big fan of defining roles. I really
Mm-hmm.
hung quite literally to what I had said earlier about not placing fences around players. But you really quickly realize that, uh, not every player is built the same way. It shouldn't be equal opportunity offense. And sometimes when you tell guys, man, I really don't want you, shooting these shots, and here's why, but they get discouraged. And I myself as a player was not a great scorer. I was, I really focused on, uh, you know, creating opportunities for those guys that were, and locking down defense and hopefully creating more opportunities for those guys that were, and that's kind of carried over into my coaching as well. However, um, I've kind of grown to have those conversations. They're tough conversations.
Yeah.
There's no doubt, and they're sometimes you have to bite the bullet and have it. But what I've tried to use, as I said before, I speak directly. I speak in facts with
Mm-hmm.
them. If you're shooting, in the 20s percentage wise from three, it's just not that. That's not the shot for you. And I mentioned it earlier. What's your primary part of your game, and let's develop
Yeah.
a secondary part which will act as a counter. I have a player right now who is a great 3-point shooter. He continues to develop be efficient in that role. And he really feels, strongly, coach, I'm putting in the time in the weight room. I really feel like I can develop this inside game. And, I don't want to discourage that from him. I just want him to see how the primary part of his game and becoming so great at that will open more opportunities. You start shooting threes like that, they're going to close out differently on you, and that's going to create opportunities to get to that place of finishing at the rim, or maybe a little mid-range action. And I just try really hard to help them understand that. And then, there's times when with the right player, you can make a point to the entire squad as, this is how this guy helps us. If we're not going to look at him on these cuts, we're playing 5-on-4 on the offensive side of the ball. And what that's helped is, every player feels that they do have the opportunity to score. However, your wide range of skill sets or lack thereof is going to determine the types of shots that we're comfortable with you taking in the offense.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means, naturally you're going to take more shots or less shots, and it's all relative. And it happens at every level of basketball, but I think high school basketball, it's such a fine line, because you're dealing with kids who, they're still trying to understand how to cope with things, and sometimes they take things personally. And I didn't realize that at first, and it's something that I've had to to kind of reflect on. And it doesn't change the fact that I'm hard on my guys. I have great expectations for them, but they understand now I have great expectations for you within the role that you serve on this team.
And well, one of the interesting points that you brought up in terms of some of that's really important, you talked about like the primary skill set, and then you talked about the counter or the the secondary skill set. And I can imagine that you're going to have players who might be late learners on that counter, or that second skill set might not come naturally to them. And that in and of itself is a unique situation where you could have a player who's really good in the post, and maybe they can do a great, drop step or something, but they can't, do like an up and under. There's certain other like counters or skill sets or fadeaway that, they dominate in these other aspects, but they might be late learners to that. And that brings its own unique situation, because they understand the game of basketball, they know how to play, but there are maybe certain skill sets or certain counters that is going to take them longer. And go, you can take it.
And that's why, we talk about it. And I've tried to look at it as a primary part of your game, secondary part of your game. A lot of times we call them the strengths and the weaknesses, but I just, I've tried to get more positive in my language in that, and try to take weaknesses out of it altogether, because it's all, obviously that comes with a negative connotation for anybody, let alone adolescents. But it's the second you say weaknesses, they just tune you out, in my experience at least. And so in saying that, it's like, here's let's develop that second part of your game, and here's the opportunities. So for example, this kid, again, he's developed a great primary game of perimeter shooting. He has learned this summer just how to hunt his shots, whether it's off of pick and pops or, his relocations off a driving kick and respacing the floor. But, I said, let's look for opportunities to work on this secondary part of the game that we're drilling, that we're training outside of games. But inside of games, where would that be a great opportunity to look? Well, in a fast break situation, absolutely. Let's look to work on your rim finishes in a fast break situation. Let's look to, really test the waters on, let's say you get hot and they start to close out a little harder on you. Maybe they leave your feet, or they just come out, very, out of control, and you get a great straight line drive. By all means, let's work on that. Let's really look to have success on that. And so the application, even though they're hunting the primary part of their game, they understand it's okay, but in these specific situations, to start to apply that secondary part of your game. And for, some of the players, ever since I started to really communicate it in that way, I think, number one, players have been more receptive.
Yeah.
And number two, they're more apt to say, okay, I kind of like that plan. That makes a lot of sense. And then they hunt those opportunities as well. And what that brings is, more of a full game engagement, where oh, I'm gonna, here's an opportunity for me to do something different. Where sometimes, especially today, kids can lose focus really quickly, and if a situation of a game, if you're like, do not go to the rim at all, I don't want that to happen, then they're not going to sprint that lane as hard,
Mm-hmm.
and you might
You're
need
right.
that for
Absolutely.
spacing and things. So, and again, that's just an experience of success for me and some of my players. There's a lot of ways to do things though. So
Yeah.
uh, I'm sure there's other ways to achieve the same things.
Yeah, no, that's great. And for those listening out there, if you got to get away from strengths and weaknesses, I know think glows and grows. That I remember that as one.
That's a
That's the
great one.
first one that came to mind. Is
That's a great one.
positive word
And
choice.
it's rhyming. It's right up my wheelhouse.
It rhymes. There we
I'm
go.
using. I'm using.
Before we hit our concluding segment, I wanted to you talked about some of the success you've had with your programs. I think a couple. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Was it conference championships? I think. What role, if any, did you have any late learning players that were filling in roles for those players or on that teams that were having that success?
Some late learning players, not so much. A lot of those players on that was actually in my first year, where we were able to win the league, advance to the district championship game and lost. And then I was fortunate enough to win coach of the year in the conference. Talk about pressure after year one. All the way around.
Yeah.
Great pressure you invited, but yeah. So we didn't have late learners, but in similar situations, we had seasonal players that
Sure.
you had to treat kind of the same way, and we definitely had some of those players on that run, and then in the year after, where that first year they played with some other some upperclassmen who had won a district title the previous year, and so they brought a lot of experience back with them and how to do things. And I'll say this: it was great on that particular group of seniors because they had to adapt a little bit to style of play, and
Mm-hmm.
they viewed me as the assistant coach on that district championship run a little bit differently. And now as I told them, the only thing that changes is what has to. And I think that they understood that. They did a great job. Showed their maturity as people and accepting that. And they did a great job to comfort some of those seasonal guys as well to make them feel a big part of it, and they were.
Yeah, and you brought that up to kind of bring that back to something we talked about earlier. We talked about late learning players, and I think perfectly as you mentioned just fits right in that those seasonal players. Those are the players that they are playing catch up, especially if they're the ones not playing summer ball or some of these other things. They're going to be your late learners too. So
Yeah,
yeah, they definitely fit that description for sure. Awesome.
absolutely.
To wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest. So we'll go ahead and get started here with this first one. Thinking back on your coaching career, what is a moment from your career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
Oh gosh, a moment. Can I do two moments?
I won't stop you. Go for it.
I'll try to be brief. But I would say one that really sticks out to me is when I was looking to still find my ground as a coach, and where did I really want my pocket to be as a coach at any level, was my work with the Allen Iverson Round Ball Classic. I mentioned earlier I was a part of that inaugural one, and I wasn't on the floor necessarily leading drills and things. I was a passer, I was a defender, I was a read man, but I also packed and carried boxes and sold T-shirts, and went and got different things for coaches, for players, did what I needed to do just to be a part of that experience. And what that taught me was that there's no job too small. If I don't do that job, that event doesn't go off the way that they intended it to. And we can't always be so quick to try and get to the top. And it taught me that it's okay to be to kind of work your way up. And in fact, it makes you appreciate it when you get to the top of whatever level you're trying to achieve at that moment. For me, it was to become a high school head basketball coach. Another moment more centered around my players. I've always, I've talked a little bit about here is reflecting and self-reflecting and being able to be honest. I'm always tell my guys, like, anything I ask you to do, I'm already doing. I've already gone through the pain of making it a habit. And self-reflection was one of those things, because you go out, you learn, you want to implement all this stuff, and you're like, no, I learned it. I taught it this way, and this is the way it's supposed to go. And you're like, okay, but it's not that way for everybody, or it might not work for you or them. And you have to adapt and adjust. So you're always reflecting and trying to find ways where, man, is what I'm doing really getting through them? And we had an example my second year in. A lot of the same guys that were, maybe reserves on that district title team, that league championship team, district runner-up team, that, are seasonal guys, what have you. We were in a tight game with a conference opponent, and, late in the game, and take a timeout, something that we had seen within the way they were defending. And we have the conference MVP, two-time MVP on our squad at the time. And we anticipated they were going to try and double him, what have you. So we designed a little bit of a faux action to get him coming across and take advantage of maybe some over aggressive play. And, it worked well. We got the ball into him on the block right where we wanted it to. This kid's 6'4", 240. He's dominant as all get out. At worst, he's going to get he played point guard for us that year. But no lie. He ended up, through he and I have a great relationship. We've continued to train, not to get sidetracked, but now he's cultivated that relationship with he and I to, and his, increasing work ethic to a conference player of the year, Division III conference. So, and as a sophomore, so he's got a lot to go, but, great accomplishments already for him. But, we run the play. We do a very nice job of execution for a play we've never practiced. It was just something that we had seen in the game. And he catches the ball in the low block. And again, this is a two-time MVP. He's huge. At worst, he's going to get fouled and have 2 free throws. We're tied in the game. So, not really any pressure to, on the shot. And they throw a double coming down from the elbow, and without hesitation, this kid reads that, and spacing, having set the screen, is wide open. Is one of those seasonal guys who's, he works his tail off when he's there. He has a purpose, of course, but maybe his primary role wasn't to score. This kid puts the ball on the floor one time, reads a double team, throws a pass right over the top of this kid for the game-winning layup, and you sit there and, great play, and I'm sitting there thinking, no, it wasn't really the play. It wasn't how you thought things were going to end, but it was one of those moments where I had to sit back after a few days, even a few years, to realize what they understood right there was, we always teach. Yeah. I'm going to show you how to play, and not just to play. And that's helping, going back to the training versus coaching side, where coaching kids is helping them to understand how each player is, and their skill set is beneficial, and how they can help you. And one thing that showed me was that particular player understood what was probably going to happen, but how that attention that the defense gave him was going to open an opportunity for a teammate. And, the fact that he was more than willing to, and everybody would have understood had he gone 1-on-2 and taken it up at that size where he caught the ball on the floor, and he chose to make the correct basketball play. And I mean, it resulted in a win. So that's, so much on those guys, and they're trusting one another. They're listening to us preach those things day in and day out, and taking it to heart as it was. And those two moments for me have been huge in my career, my work with, whether it's coaching my high school team or training clients going forward.
I can imagine in that situation that you could have people talking about what a great play you drew up there. What a great X's and O's that was you and your son.
Yeah, and it was to the catch, but I was like, nah, man, that was get the ball there. But the way that play ended was the 5 guys on the floor just, again, understanding how they worked, off of one another, and it was it was great moment for them, and I'm happy that I was able to realize that, days, weeks, months, years later, that that's really what that was. That's what that was about.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's what it's all about right there, and ties right into our topic too. So, excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
To wrap up, Coach, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox. It's your platform to get out your final message, final idea, closing thought, something that you'd want to go ahead and leave the listeners with. If you go over 60 seconds, that's okay too. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor, Coach. Go ahead and take it away.
Oh man, I just I'll try not to go over 60 seconds, but like I said, it's like a volcano sometimes. I would just say that we're in a really good spot right now as a basketball community across all levels. Even AAU, though it gets a bad rap if it's done correctly, which there's a lot of programs that do it correctly on its most grassroots levels. And not always the UIBL levels and things that we see, on TV, and that's like what we depict as AAU basketball. But basketball in itself is such artistry in both how we teach it and how we play it. But one thing that we have to understand as coaches and as players is that it does not define any one person. No one person is basketball, and probably Kobe has been and was the most outspoken about this, right? Like it was a craft, it was something he was passionate about and he wanted to do really, really well, but it didn't define him, as he proved after his career. Writing books, doing movies and all that kind of thing. But in fact, how one teaches or plays the game depicts who we are as people, and our character ultimately shows in the way that we do things, whether it's the way that we coach kids in practice and in games, and families and community members see that, or families and community members are seeing how those kids play the game, how they compete, how they respond to coaches, how they respond to certain situations, how they receive information from teammates. Those things are ultimately character things, and that's what the game of basketball really is about. That's what any sport is about, but for me, that's what basketball has shown. And we can be associated with hoop by all means. I mean, we are. I know when around town, if somebody were to say Coach Bardo, the first thing they think is basketball, and that's all well and good, but I don't want people to think that that's who I am. It's just something that I do, and it's a way that I go about, my passion of education. But we should never define people as basketball, as being, hoop. I think that's, in a way that's disrespectful. And you're saying you're not, we're not seeing who you are as a person. We're seeing who you are as a basketball player. What you get if you really watch the game and you look at how a kid competes, you look at, again, all those things I said about how they receive information from teammates, that's really telling you who they are. And the game's meant to be creative as well as to create for us. And whatever your hoops journey is, whatever hoops journey you're on, basketball is just a mode of transportation. And you have to take time to cultivate relationships from these things. Those relationships ultimately create opportunities, friendships, travels, and just overall experiences that you might not otherwise have. I mean, I think I've in this get to know you, the first part of this segment, I think I covered most of those. How it can take you places, it can introduce you to people, and put you in great opportunities to continue to give back and create opportunities for others to have those experiences too. I just think we have to, sometimes think about that in the world of, mixtapes and, social media, just 30-second clips. We can associate people with basketball, but we can't define people that way. And I think that's really important for us to know, because we lose sight of the fact, and sometimes we forget what it's about, and that someday that ball's not going to bounce for you anymore. And what are you going to have after that? For some players, maybe they go into coaching to share that, and for others, they're going to go into into the workforce, into the world, and you're going to learn and have those experiences to fall back on. And I think that's probably the most important thing.
I love that idea of, something like basketball, like it's what I do, but it's not who I am. I think like in so many things, even whether it's, professional life or things, we get sometimes wrapped up our identity, sometimes or get labeled or label others based on what they do rather than who they are as people. And, maybe a small, part of their life becomes the label that we give them, but there's so much more to them as people. Yeah. I
Absolutely.
think that's excellent. Coach Bardo, I want to thank you for spending some time talking about your program, talking about developing late learners, your coaching philosophy, rhyme schemes, simplicity, all that great stuff. It was great. And I wish you luck next year, especially as you get those late learners playing big roles in your program next year.
Absolutely, Coach. I appreciate the opportunity again to share and learn from you as well. I got the lows and the grows. I love it.
Awesome. And thank you all for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.